Okay, so it's been just over a year now since I stepped into the CEO's role, and man, what a year it's been. Despite it being real challenging times for plastics globally, it's been a real pleasure working with and supporting the industry. Thank you very much for the warmth and welcome that all the members have given me as I've been around visiting everybody. Thanks very much to the National Executive, our local branches and sector groups, and the Environment Committee. Plastics New Zealand's role is to support you as companies to succeed and grow in your efforts, but the real effect comes when it's collaborative work, and really appreciate you guys working with me as the year's gone. And last but not least, I'd like to thank my team, Kelly, Judy, Simon and Bruce Dunlop. They've really helped make my transition really smooth, and they're a fantastic team to work with. So early last year, I heard from our members that they wanted Plastics New Zealand to be involved in the conversations around plastics. I therefore worked really hard to place us right at the centre of those conversations. It became clear really quickly that we faced accelerating pressures on plastics, particularly relating to end of life and the overall perception of the material within government. Improving our connections with government became a really high priority to ensure that we could influence the direction of travel for plastics in New Zealand. We've now got good relationships with the Honourable Eugenie Sage, our Associate Minister for the Environment, and the team at the Ministry for the Environment. We also work closely with the Office of the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor as they work through the Rethinking Plastics in Aotearoa review. So Plastics New Zealand is now one of the organisations that they call for technical advice relating to plastics. And the conversations also moved from an end-of-life focus to a more whole-of-life impact when comparing various materials options against each other. So I'm quite pleased with what we've managed to achieve in that space. Plastics New Zealand's not the only organisation dealing with government on these matters. Another important aspect of our advocacy work this year has been building stronger relationships with the other key stakeholders in the plastics packaging and resource recovery space. By collaborating across the system, creating a shared voice and working smarter as a collective, we have much greater impact in our work, and it's to the benefit of all of our members and NZ Inc as a whole. This was in evidence a couple of days ago when we had a meeting with Minister Sage involving Plastics New Zealand, Waste Mins, Packaging New Zealand and the Packaging Forum. It's really good being able to come together collectively to work together like that. Another advantage of this collaboration has been reaching many of the retailers and brand owners who are customers to the plastics industry and have a strong influence on our products. So each interaction with these guys is an opportunity to educate on the positives of plastics and help them avoid unintended consequences inherent with most alternatives to plastics, particularly in that packaging space. So there's been so much going on in the environmental space that a lot of my time has been in that area. To give you guys an idea of the scope of this work, the list shown here shows the main topics of conversations with MFE and the Minister. While packaging is often at the primary focus of these conversations at the moment, the longer term implications are really important for the whole industry. As the world moves towards circular resource use, we need to ensure that everyone across the system understands the criticality of plastics to our quality of life, the technology levels we have, and for achieving New Zealand's zero carbon 2050 goals. At the end of life, plastics needs to be seen as a resource to be recovered rather than rubbish. This is why you'll often hear me referring to a low emissions circular economy for plastics in New Zealand. Bit of a stuck record on that and recycling of polypropylene over the last year. It's not just about creating a circular system, it's also about realising that we need plastics to achieve our long-term environmental outcomes. Been a lot of formal submissions over the last year as well. COVID-19 has actually disrupted government plans around these consultations and the planned work streams. It does appear that the waste levy recommendations have reached Cabinet and some announcements are pending in the next month or so. Alongside this, the Ministry's thrown its hat in the ring for a significant chunk of the $3 billion shovel-ready infrastructure spend The Prime Minister also noted waste and plastics recycling infrastructure as a particular focus during an infrastructure webinar that was run by Business New Zealand a while ago. So we may well see some developments in that area in the near future. One of the big consultations for the plastics industry last year was around priority products and product stewardship. The recommendations on this have not been to Cabinet yet. Minister Sage and MFE are hoping to get this in front of them soon, but COVID has definitely delayed this particular one. Given that the waste minimisation funding has been used to kick off the co-design process for a container return scheme and farm plastics, I feel it's very likely that beverage packaging and farm plastics will be declared priority products when they get round to it. I'm also expecting tyres, agrochemicals and refrigerants will be declared. E-waste is a little bit more unknown. There has been some activity relating to lithium battery recycling, so they may well declare a subset of e-waste. The silence has been quite deafening when it comes to declaring plastic packaging as a priority product. We made a really strong case for not declaring it as one, pointing out the anti-competitive nature of this, the unintended consequences of driving producers to the alternatives, and the fact that no one else globally is actually focused on a single material type in this way. It's still a bit of a fingers crossed on that one, but we've made a good case for not declaring it. Excuse me. Another one that is pending is the Basel Amendments. So again, these have not gone to Cabinet, and Government doesn't actually seem to see this one as particularly urgent at the moment, but the amendments do go into effect on the 1st of January 2021, whether we're ready or not. If any of you are exporting any mixed plastics, that will require permits from both New Zealand and the receiving country after the 1st of January, I'd actually suggest you need to look carefully at your options. The New Zealand Environmental Protection Agency has indicated a typical permitting timeframe of 3 to 4 months for these permits. So if they're taking quite a long time in actually implementing the regulations, you may have to stop shipping while your applications are processed. And just before COVID hit us, there were a lot of conversations going on around single-use plastics and material phase-outs. In December, the Minister announced a phase out of PVC and polystyrene, and then MFE has been continuing to do some pre-consultation in this area and on other particular single-use items. At the moment, this is on hold, and with an election that's fast approaching, it's unlikely that it's going to be pushed through this year. If we end up with a Labor Green coalition, it's not going to disappear, and it's possible that this will still stay on the agenda with any government given the strong level of consumer support. The phase-outs focused on PVC and polystyrene for curbside collections, and that was primarily due to the really low volume at curbside. Discussions were also covering rigid LDPE due to its low curbside volumes. It's interesting to note that when government first announced phasing out polystyrene, they were only considering expanded polystyrene like that used in meat trays, takeaway containers and coffee cups. They actually had no idea that it was used in things like yogurt containers and other food serviceware and packaging. Seafood bins are also on the radar for local use. They do accept that these are necessary for performance and exports, but they do want to see them removed locally. So yeah, there's potentially some fairly strong movement around EPS. The single-use plastics bans, that focused on specific items, in particular those where they see there's viable alternatives like straws, cotton buds, coffee stirrers, balloon sticks, disposable cutlery, drinkware and tableware, fruit stickers and a number of other things. As well as advocacy within country, Plastics New Zealand is also involved in global advocacy for the plastics industry. It took me a little while to get my head around it, but there's a significant overlap between the global groups that are shown on this slide. Excuse me. All of them involve the chemicals and plastics manufacturers and also many of the plastics industry associations. So in December last year, a plastics leadership group was set up under the ICCA. This group coordinates the advocacy efforts of the industry across the multilateral forums, such as the United Nations, G7, G20, OECD, and the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions. To give you an idea of the scale of these efforts, we've just had a budget of $420,000 US cleared for this year. Half of that's coming from the World Plastics Council and the other half from the ICCA. So that's going to fund both the global advocacy efforts and the development of materials that can be used by various plastics organisations in our dealings with our own governments. So that's going to be, it's quite exciting to have those materials that will be coming out. At the moment, the focus of the PLG is on the 5th session of the UN Environment Assembly, or UNIA 5. So the theme of the Assembly is all around strengthening actions to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But of particular importance to the plastics industry is that Norway is pushing for a legally binding plastics agreement, and that will include discussions on caps on plastics production, taxation or levies, and other regulatory levers. The representation of the NGOs at UNIA 5 is very strong, so it's really vital that the industry voice is cohesive and compelling. While we support quite strongly the move towards the circular plastics economy and eliminating leakage into the marine environment, we really want to remain in control of our own destiny rather than being driven there by NGOs and governments who often only see the end of life issues rather than considering the positives. So another big move locally last year was the reform of vocational education. Despite significant opposition from the manufacturing sector, the reforms do include the dissolution of the industry training organisations. Effectively, half of the operations of the ITOs will be absorbed into the new National Institute of Technology, or the giant Polytech. The other half will form the Workforce Development Councils. Now, plastics ends up in the Manufacturing, Engineering, Logistics and Technology WDC, or the MELT WDC as it's now being called. So competence will primarily merge into this one, and at the moment it's looking like they will hopefully be leading this work as well. We will also cross over a little into the construction and infrastructure space, however, particularly around pipe and building materials. So we've worked with Competence and Business New Zealand to provide feedback to date, and we'll definitely continue to do this as well as making direct submissions as required. The main focus of this work is to ensure that mechanisms exist to hear the needs of smaller industries like ours. We sit alongside some very big sectors such as food and beverage manufacturing within the WDC, so it's really essential that those processes are put into place. Okay. Now, Plastics New Zealand's also part of a manufacturing alliance along with Metals New Zealand, Wood Processors and Manufacturers, the Manufacturers Network and the Maintenance Engineering Society. So late last year, we commissioned a report that outlined the importance of manufacturing to New Zealand's economy, the challenges and opportunities facing the sector and the work that was required by both industry and government to ensure future success of our sector. The main thrust of the report was a call to government to partner with industry to develop a growth strategy which results in productivity gains, builds skills and overall creates a supportive policy and trade environment for the sector. So we began socialising this in December last year and we're continuing that this year. It was planned for launch in May, which obviously didn't happen. But a key focus really was raising the profile of manufacturing within ministries and with ministers as well. You know, they've had a bit of a skewed view of manufacturing for many years. There's a lot of discussion of high tech, but they seem to forget that high tech is actually based off traditional manufacturing and that most of our traditional manufacturing is also quite high tech in and of itself. So we use both direct information like that on this slide, showing you know, how impactful it actually is as a sector, but also how essential it actually is to the success of other sectors, and that, you know, we purchase significant shares of the value of output from other sectors. We enable other sectors. I mean, gosh, we would have stopped food production in New Zealand without plastic packaging during level 4, you know, little things like that. So we've been really pushing for them to really recognise how important manufacturing is for our economy. I'm not going to go through absolutely everything, but we ran through the challenges that we face, and in terms of the fact that we have relatively low productivity in comparison to our overseas competitors. There's a lot of environmental pressures on the industry at the moment. We're facing skills shortages and quite a few interesting trade conditions at the moment. But out of these challenges also arises some good opportunities in the areas that we are keen to work on with government. Around trade, we believe that they could create an even playing field for local manufacturers with some stronger addressing of protectionism and non-tariff measures during trade negotiations, and a bit stronger enforcement at the border for some of those imports coming in. There's a lot of opportunities around innovation and Industry 4.0 to help us improve productivity, develop new business models, and basically create an upskilling of our workforce. Another bonus with Industry 4.0 is that we can also attract highly skilled workers into the industry through this adoption. In terms of environment, there's definite challenges, but with New Zealand's high level of renewable energy, we can also build a strong low carbon manufacturing sector that can actually supply products with a low carbon footprint to an increasingly discerning global market. And similar things for circular economy. There's some definite advantages there if we move reasonably quickly on this. Also with the circular economy, that collaboration with domestic manufacturing is vital to actually achieve that in country. Servitisation is another area that a lot of companies are already expanding into services. They're providing, in our space, they're providing design services, maintenance work, ongoing repairs, that sort of thing. But in general for manufacturing, there's quite a bit of work that can also be done in that space. And there's a lot of opportunities in the construction and infrastructure space as well. So, with $12 billion announced earlier in the year and now $3 billion shovel-ready projects on top of that, there is a big call for products in those spaces. So, we're keen to work with government on identifying the requirements for those projects and actually, utilise New Zealand manufacturing as much as possible within that. So government procurement is definitely on the radar. So everything was going fairly well with that. We were having some good discussions with numerous ministries. Grant Robertson and David Parker were involved. It wasn't going particularly fast, but it was moving. And then this little bugger hit. So everything changed when COVID-19 started spreading. Every aspect of our lives has been impacted, and we're going to continue to see the effects of this pandemic for a long time. So I'm just going to take a bit of a sideways move, and then I'll come back to manufacturing. So for Plastics New Zealand, the pandemic meant that most of the things we'd been working on went right out the window. At the start of level 4, there was a huge amount of confusion with conflicting advice that was coming out of government. The principles-based approach to the lockdown meant that the direction of travel was clear, but there was little detail provided. The various ministries did an amazing job of creating the detail in an incredibly short time, and we saw unprecedented cooperation between the ministries and a huge willingness to actually work with industry. But unfortunately, it also meant that the information was changing on a near daily basis, and clear advice was really hard to access. So to assist our members, we decided to try and get to the right information and provide this to the industry in as clear a manner as possible. So we had some good feedback on the updates that were provided. Hopefully you all found those useful. So in terms of manufacturing, it became really clear at pretty much the first 2 days of level 4 that the government had no idea what the depth and complexity of the supply chains in New Zealand actually was like. They were telling essential businesses that they needed to close and actually threatening those frontline essential services through doing that. And it was purely because they just didn't understand what was happening. They didn't realise that a 30-cent spare part that's made by a small local manufacturer could actually ultimately disrupt the food chain. Thankfully, they've actually been listening to the Manufacturing Alliance in the months prior, and discussions were quickly started to actually work through those complexities for manufacturing. Excuse me. The various associations were able to provide information to government on which of their members were actually essential in full or part. And we were also able to assist our members to understand what they needed to do in terms of registrations, health and safety, and everything else. Given the go hard, go early approach, I really think that without the work that we'd already been doing around manufacturing matters with the government, that we would have struggled to keep some of our essential services in operation over the lockdown. So over the last couple of months, we've been having weekly government briefings for non-primary manufacturing. These have been really useful. MFAT and NZTE have done a great job of pulling together information for the attendees, pulling in the other government ministries, and facilitating discussions between the groups. They've also provided a direct information flow up to Ministers Grant Robertson, David Parker and Phil Twyford, amongst others, and on occasion the Prime Minister. So these meetings have provided a mechanism for the industry to share their challenges and the concerns to government that they could then look at reasonably quickly. These meetings are ongoing, so please continue to send me through any information or concerns that you've got so that I can feed these up. In terms of the impact on the wider plastics industry, it was quite interesting. We're really diverse as an industry, and the impacts were quite diverse because of that. Around 80% actually ended up operating in full or in part at level 4. Around 60% were fully operational. Many of these were in the packaging space or supplying to Fisher & Paykel. And many of these companies actually had to ramp up production just to keep up with the orders. Shortages in imported packaging meant that local manufacturers picked up some business. And yeah, Fisher & Paykel's ramped up its supply of respiratory gear enormously over the last few months. So it's definitely kept a few people busy. Around 20% of companies were partially operational. Now I think these guys actually had some of the biggest challenges because getting staff to come back when you've been shut for a while was incredibly difficult, particularly where wage subsidies were in effect. Many people viewed it as a paid holiday effectively and didn't want to come back to work if there was any risk at all. So there were some definite headaches for those companies, and then about 20% of our industry was fully shut during that time. So we also saw some really interesting things with companies pivoting their operations to create PPE in particular, things like face shields, aprons, the shields that we are all seeing everywhere now in retail. All of those came from the plastics industry. So yeah, well done to everybody. I'd also like to thank the raw materials suppliers. So with global logistics being really challenging, you guys did a champion job of actually keeping our manufacturers supplied with materials. Throughout, there were a few delays with ghost shipments and things like that, but overall, the industry hasn't really stopped because of material shortages, which was great. So thank you guys. So the economic hit's been massive globally and locally. So the manufacturing index that's shown here, that highlights really clearly what's happened and how severe the contraction is. You can see the GFC back in 08 and that the impact of this has been much shorter, sharper and much more greatly felt. We are rapidly recovering, but we're expected to be in a contraction phase for some time to come. Discussions with those across the industry also indicate that the biggest economic hit may actually be still to come, probably somewhere around September to November is the current guess on that one. Forecasts are very unpredictable, air freight's enormously expensive, and thousands of people are out of work and without discretionary income. So it's been tough, and really feel for you guys who either had to shut down or are having issues, ongoing issues. Despite the challenges, we have actually seen some silver linings out of this. The government's now fully aware of how essential the plastics sector is to the success of almost every other essential service sector, both here and overseas. The connections that we've developed within the various ministries are also going to be of benefit to the industry for our ongoing advocacy efforts. As a whole, we've all rapidly adjusted to working remotely and flexibility. So that actually means there might be some opportunities for cost savings through reduction of travel, downsizing offices, that sort of thing. And in general, I think the concerns of employers around offering flexible working have been well and truly dealt with. Flexible working practices can make a huge difference for your staff, actually making them more engaged and loyal to your business in the long term. And you'll have seen through this those who are capable of working at home and those who may not be. You'll also have learned who your star employees are, and also found some of those at the other end of the scale. Make sure that you acknowledge the efforts of your stars and actually leverage that going on forward. These are likely the people who are going to be eager to help your business succeed and can affect the most change for you in the long term. So maybe have a look at developing them. In terms of ongoing government support, I'm sure you guys are fairly up on the wage subsidies and everything in general, and the business loan schemes. But there's also been additional funding around training. Our sector is one of the ones that has got targeted funding for trainees and apprentices. The details are still forthcoming on that, but Competence is expecting to get some information out on that soon. So this will help people to maintain the apprentices and trainees that they've got, potentially take on new employees under that scheme. There is also a wage subsidy specifically targeted for 2 years for apprentices, which will also assist employers to keep people on. In terms of exports and digital trade, NZTE and MFAT are both keen to assist there. NZTE has been given a significant amount of funding to assist with that. And MFAT's got people on the ground in many of the markets that we sell to, and they're really keen to help. So if anyone wants to be hooked in with the team there, please let me know. So how can Plastics New Zealand help? Basically, we're here to help you guys and support you in any way we can. If any of you are having issues and needing to look at redeploying staff or equipment, then we can actually assist with that. We've helped companies in the past there, so please let us know. Training and hooking you guys up with competence there if you aren't already, we can definitely assist with that. And I think the big thing in general is feeding through to government any concerns that we are having as an industry so that we can try and get some action there. Things have changed so much though that while we could go back to business as usual and focus on everything that we were focusing on previously, I do want to make sure that we're actually going in the right direction in terms of your needs. So one thing that we will be doing quite soon is putting out a member survey. So that'll be actually just checking in with where you guys are actually at, the impacts of COVID-19 on your business and your staff. And then looking at things of what support do you actually want from us? What do you want to see more of, less of, and proposing a couple of options there and seeing where you guys are thinking. And that's basically just to make sure that we are keeping up with your needs in these quite challenging times. So we will be doing that soon. And to finish on a positive, so we put in a waste minimisation fund application in 2019. This is still a work in progress, but announcements are pending. So I can't tell you a lot more than that yet, but things are looking quite positive at the moment. So that will include several initiatives that are aimed at actually creating tangible change towards circular economy. And real practical help for businesses, and this will include circular plastics training, a design advisory service, and facilitating New Zealand recycling solutions for plastics. So yes, hopefully we'll be able to announce something reasonably soon on that one. Okay, and that's me. Now I have jumped around a little bit, but I'm hoping that there will be some questions from people. If you have a question, please raise your hand and Kelly will unmute you or pop it in the chat. There are no questions in the Q&A. I was hoping that someone would be putting something in and it could be upvoted. Deathly silence. Someone's got to have a question for me, surely. Okay, Caleb, you're unmuted.
Oh, it's Morris Watson here. I was going to congratulate you. It's a nice new name, though. I don't know how I got that. Might even be Morris spelt backwards, but however, We won't worry about a little bit of technology. But hey, I'm just congratulating you on a very well run first up. I know it's been a bit challenging for everyone, but hey, I think you've done a great job, and I just want to congratulate you for all your efforts.
Thank you very much, Morris. Really appreciate it. So yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts, yeah, just get in touch anytime. Phone's always on, and you can always leave a message if I don't answer. Thank you, everybody, and thanks again to Mark. Really appreciate your efforts, as I said before, and yeah, welcome to Murray and into a new year. I never know how to finish these things, so we might just leave it at that. So thank you, everybody, for attending. And yeah, get in touch if you have any further questions. Okay, thank you very much.